Governor Samuel Pennypacker, however, refused to sign it. Pennypacker used his veto message to deliver a stern rebuke to eugenic sterilization movement. Quote, "It is plain that the safest and most effective method of preventing procreation would be to cut off the heads of the inmates," he said. Quote, "And such authority is given by the bill. The legislator failed to realize," Pennypacker said, "that, quote, the scientists, like all other men whose experiences have been limited to our pursuit, sometimes need to be restrained." The fundamental problem with the bill, he said, was simple. It would, quote, "inflict cruelty upon the helpless class in the community, which the state has undertaken to protect." With his veto, Pennypacker, a progressive reformer with an opponent of child labor, and he was an opponent of child labor, become one of the most prominent figures in any field to stand up to the eugenics movement. Despite his serious concerns, Pennypacker was able to keep a sense of humor. Toward the end of his term, when he was addressing a loud and unruly gathering of reporters, he raised his arms to ask for silence and declared, quote, "Gentlemen, gentlemen, you forget you owe me a vote of thanks. Didn't I veto the bill for the castration of idiots?" Ooh, calling his voters out. It was not long before the tide began to turn. In Indiana, Dr. Sharp, who was sterilizing inmates in the state of reformity, was strongly lobbying the legislature to legalize eugenic sterilization. With his support, a bill was introduced aimed at confined criminals, idiots, rapists, and imbeciles. Under the bill, state institutions would be allowed to sterilize inmates who were medically certified as having no probability of improvement. To help make the case to the legislator, Dr. Sharp submitted testimonials from the young men who had operated on, attesting that the procedure would be beneficial for those who were sterilized. This time the eugenicists prevailed. The legislator passed the bill and the government signed it. In 1907, Indiana became the first state in the nation to legalize compulsory eugenic sterilization. Other states soon followed. In 1909, California enacted a sweeping sterilization law. Once again, a doctor with expertise in the field of playing a key role, Dr. F. W. Hatch, secretly of the State Lunacy Commission, helped draft the California statute, which authorized prisons and state hospitals to carry out sterilizations. People eligible for the procedure included mental defectives, criminals, moral degenerates, and sexual perverts, which probably meant gay people, not necessarily pedophilia. We could only hope that it was just pedophiles, but no, it's probably normal stuff like sodomy or whatever, sodomy laws, yeah. um, which Texas and the GOP are actually overturning. So we're actually going to head back to this soon. Nice. Great. Yeah. Solid stuff we got going in our country to look forward to. All right. In Oregon, another doctor, Bethania Owens Adar, one of the first female physicians in the West, was the driving force behind eugenic sterilization. With backing from other doctors in the state, Dr. Owens Adair promoted a bill to allow sterilization of criminals, epileptics, the insane, and the feeble minded. She succeeded in getting a bill through the legislature in 1909, but not in persuading the governor to sign it. Although she failed in her home state, Dr. Owens Adar, who has been called the eugenic sterilization's quote pioneer advocate in the Pacific Northwest, was influential in getting similar laws enacted the same year in neighboring Washington state. 8 years later, she would succeed in Oregon as well. More states adopted sterilization over the next few years until by 1913 the first legislative wave was complete. At that point, 12 states Indiana, Washington, California, Connecticut, Nevada, Iowa, New Jersey, New York, North Dakota, Michigan, Kansas, and Wisconsin had enacted sterilization laws. The laws varied in who could be sterilized and what process had to be followed. Some were especially broad. Iowa allowed sterilizations of, quote, criminals, rapists, idiots, feeble minded, imbeciles, lunatics, drunkards, drug fiends, epileptics, syphilitics, moral and sexual perverts, and diseased and degenerate persons. Kansas law made it a crime for managing officer of any state institution to fail to recommend sterilization for any inmate who was deemed unfit to procreate. A supervisor who neglected to have someone sterilized who was covered by the law could be imprisoned for up to 30 days. Taken together, these new sterilization laws established a legal regime of eugenic sterilization that covered a significant portion of the country. The first wave of sterilization laws did not reach Virginia or any states in the Deep South. Eugenics was promoted largely by progressives, intellectuals, professionals, and in the South of that era, all of these were in comparatively short supply. H. L. Menkek exaggerated outrageously in his famous 1917 essay, The Sahara of the Beaux-Arts, in which he called the American South, quote, almost as sterile, artistically, intellectually, culturally as the Sahara Desert. Nevertheless, it was true that the South trailed the nation by many measures, particularly in the sciences. In 1910 and 20s, not a single university in the Deep South offered a PhD in chemistry. When eugenics did gain traction in the South, it largely began in the Upper South, in states like Virginia, South Carolina, which were most exposed to influences from the North. The strongest supporter from those states, most progressive sectors, medical doctors, university professors, reform minded lawyers, many members of these groups followed developments outside of the South closely, and they were anxious for their region to catch up with the most enlightened North and West, and to prove critics like Mensch and wrong. In Virginia, one of the main centers of eugenic thought was the University of Michigan. Oh, University of Virginia, sorry. In 1903, it hired a new president, Edward, Edwin Anderson Alderman, a leading progressive educator. He modernized the medical faculty, bringing experts in genetics, many of them eugenicists. Under Alderman, the historian Gregor Michael Dorr was observed. The university became, quote, an epicenter of eugenical thought, closely linked with the national eugenics movement, and to the state mental health professionals who promoted eugenic sterilization. End quote. Among the most prominent of the University of Virginia eugenicists was Harvey Ernest Jordan, who would go on to become dean of the medical school. Jordan, who had extensive ties to eugenic groups nationwide, helped organize Virginia scientists and lay people to promote eugenic policies, including sterilization. Forced sterilization was, Jordan believed, necessary, quote, for the protection of society against the distressing economic and moral burdens and racial decay.